Recently, I told a friend of mine that I was elected to the Board of Trustees at the Burlingame Library. His answer to me was, "Geez, that's great, Mark, but do you really think libraries have a future?" He continued to say that you can get all the information you want from the net. Nobody goes to the library anymore. Libraries will fade away. Today, my guest, Brad McCulley, Burlingame City Librarian, will have an opportunity to respond back to those statements.
It's a small town. Yeah, it's a small town. It's a small town.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and thanks for joining me on Burlingame. It's a small town. Brad, thank you very much for being here today with me.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Glad to be here.
You're in your home turf here. We're in the conference room just adjacent to your office, so
Yep.
that's pretty cool. Thanks for letting us share it.
Long commute for me.
So, Brad, you heard the comments that my buddy said about libraries going away. Would you like to rebuttal with that at all?
I would love to. First, let me start with a fellow trustee member came to me with the almost exact same phrase when he started as a trustee. His nephew, who works in the tech industry, said the exact same thing almost. Libraries are not fading away. If anything, we have bent over backwards reinventing ourselves. And so, you know, to counter what he said, less than 5% of what is produced, has ever been produced, has been digitized. So you're going to find a lot less than everything on the internet. But we have reinvented ourselves through programming, events, everything. You know, the only thing that really has died away is the idea of a reference librarian. Someone who, you know, people used to come in and ask us questions or call and ask us questions. That has definitely kind of died away. Other than that, we are prospering and moving forward as much as any other time in history. So
I just think they're great for a center for the community, people to gather at.
exactly.
And go from there. So, Brad,
Exactly.
Before we move on to the questions and answers, and why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you became city librarian, and maybe a little bit of the history of the Burlingame Library.
Sure. I started working here in 2007 as a library aide. I knew I wanted to go to library school, but I wanted to start off as, you know, just kind of get my feet wet and see if that's really I was a career change. I was a pastry chef before that. And so I started working here as an aide, and really enjoyed it. Worked myself up to library assistant, graduated with a library degree in around 2010, started working. That was when the economy tanked at that time. And so I kind of got my feet wet as a librarian doing job search programs, bringing in people to work on resumes, things like that. So that was how I got my feet wet. So I was a librarian here from 2010 to about 2014, and then I was promoted to the adult services manager. Right around that time, we were just finishing up the 2014 renovation.
Great remodel.
Yeah. Yep. And then Pat Harding decided to retire.
Mm-hmm.
Pat came to me. I'd only been the manager like less than a year, and Pat came to me and said, "What do you think about being the city librarian?" Which it really kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah.
But I was honored for the request and the confidence that Pat had, and so I thought about it, did a little research, you know, because administration was not what I wanted to do when I got into librarianship.
Mm-hmm.
And there, you know, to be honest, there are a lot of days where I really wish I was a librarian on the desk.
Well, I think it's admirable of you when I see you down at the information center helping out on, I think it's Fridays or certain days
Fridays,
of the
I
week.
do.
You're down there for
I
a
do.
couple of hours. It's great to see the city librarian doing
And I
that.
enjoy, I love keeping my finger, you know, like
Yeah.
I working one-on-one with people is what I really enjoy.
Yeah. So can you answer a couple of questions for me?
Sure.
In your bio, I noticed that you are a Russian language major. That was in Florida, right?
Yes, at Florida State.
Yep. How does one choose Russian as a major?
It started in the Navy. I was on an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean, and at that time there was still a Soviet Union. The Soviets would have small ships follow us around wherever we went, and they would love to pick up our trash from our ship. I was on an aircraft carrier, and this is a very unfortunate thing, but the Navy dumps tons of trash per day into the ocean. Usually it's deep ocean, but they do, and or they used to anyway. And these Soviet ships would follow us around, picking up our trash, hoping to get classified information by accident.
Oh my gosh.
So the bridge, the captain would always want to know the name of the ship. And I taught myself Cyrillic and some basic Russian grammar so that I could tell the captain what the name of the ship was. So when I left the Navy and went to school, I decided, I was like, I've got some basic Russian under my belt, and I decided to major in it. So.
And okay, so pastry chef, that caught me.
Pastry
also.
chef was another career change.
Pastry chef to librarian.
I moved to Atlanta, ran into a friend of mine that I had known previously at Florida State University when I was majoring in Russian, and he had just gotten through culinary school, and I've always enjoyed cooking, especially pastry. So I was like, oh, that sounds awesome, and I went to culinary school in Atlanta. Got a job at Hotel Nico, and same thing. I kind of worked myself up to the assistant pastry chef at Coke headquarters in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And did that for a while, and then moved out here in California.
So what was it? Restaurant burnout then that drove you out of?
I wouldn't call it burnout, but it's a young person's life.
Yep.
Because it's all holidays. It's
Nights,
it's 12-hour
evenings,
days
weekends, yep.
most days. So there was a little bit of burnout. Honestly, though, it was because it was a year after my daughter was born, and it was more of like, okay, now restaurants don't normally have a safety net, deferred comp or any kind of retirement system. And so I started thinking, you know what? I should probably start thinking about those things for my daughter's sake.
Yep.
So that was kind of what pushed me to move into. But I also, it's also because I really enjoyed. Well, at the time, I knew I was going to enjoy becoming a librarian.
Yeah. So why not a little bit of history now on the Burlingame Library? How many years has this library been around?
So the library was enacted or created in 1919 by the first city council, although they didn't call themselves a city council then. I forget what term they use, but it was by the original city council. It was just a small room in the same building as the city hall then. I'm not sure about the location at that time. Then next it was what is currently the Lions Club building over there. That was the library
Burlingame Ave, yeah.
Before the 1929 building was built here at this location. So the library now, the reading room and the original part of the children's room, that is what's left of the 1929 building, and the front facade, the front wall as you walk up to the building, that is from 1929. Everything else was destroyed, was knocked down, and then rebuilt as our current building in the 90s, in 95, 96, in that range.
Yeah, so it's gone through a few renovations.
It's gone through a few renovations. There was a small renovation in the 70s over here on this side of the building, the north side of the building. And then the major renovation in the 90s, and then we had our last renovation, and that one was to create more study space and meeting space, among some other things. And that was in 2015 that we completed that renovation. So,
how many libraries does Burlingame have?
We have two. We have the main, and we have the Easton branch. The Easton branch came online. It was donated by the Burlingame Women's Club. I think it was donated in the 40s. And I'd have to check with Patty Flynn. Patty Flynn's my Easton expert of when it came online as a library.
Yeah. And encompassing both libraries, how many full-time and part-time employees do you have?
So we have 24 full-time employees. Not all of them are 40-hour, but they are considered full-time benefited. And then when you include our part-time, we have roughly 60.
That would
Pre-pandemic.
That would include Easton Branch as well.
That includes Easton Branch too, exactly.
That's pre-pandemic?
No, pre-pandemic, we had close to 90 when you included the hourly staff, but the pandemic knocked a lot of people out of our sphere.
Yeah.
Which is very unfortunate. And so, when people hear 90, you're like, wow, 90 people, that's a lot. That includes someone who may work once every 2 months or something like that, or it could be some people who work 2 or 3 times a week. So
I'm going to put you on the spot right now, Brad. Okay. I threw you a couple of softballs. Now I'm going to tee it up. How often do you visit the Easton Branch?
That is and you are teeing it up, because I should visit more often. However, I don't make it over there as much as I should. But the reason I probably don't is because Kathy von Meyerhauser, who is the manager, and Patty Flynn, who is the branch supervisor, they both do such a wonderful job of maintaining the branch over there that I honestly don't need to go over there that often.
You know what? I get it. That's great.
You know what I mean?
But I had to come in with a little curveball, okay? So, okay, we're going to do some stats now, I guess, or just some whatever.
Sure.
How many books does the library carry?
It fluctuates, but at any given time, it's roughly 220 to 250,000 volumes.
That's a lot of
titles.
Books.
Yeah,
it's a lot of books.
Yeah.
So, off the top of your head, what is the most popular genre? Would it be mystery, adventure, fiction, nonfiction? What seems to get the most usage?
The most popular, I would say, is popular fiction, but it's probably a close tie to popular mystery. I think last year, some of the more popular titles were Janet Ivanovich, what's his name? Hoban, I think is his name. I think he's a mystery writer, Hoban. I'm blanking on the
That's
authors'
okay. Don't
names.
be looking at me for any help. Okay?
Well, yeah, and what's funny is I don't. That's not where I read. I tend to read sci-fi, fantasy, and so
I get it. We all have our favorites.
We all have our favorites, exactly.
So when I'm looking at downstairs at the magazines and the newspapers,
Yeah.
How many newspapers are there? There's newspapers from all over.
We have newspapers. We have about roughly 16 different newspapers that we carry.
And magazines?
Magazines, we have, I'd have to double check again, but I think there's roughly 220, 230. Yeah.
When they're said and done, the magazines and the newspapers, when they're dated, what happens to them? They recycle?
Yeah, so they have we have a retention period. So older magazines will save for, like, say, up to 1 year, maybe 2 years, depending on how popular they are. And then as the retention retires, so if after a year of holding them in service, we give them away. We put them out there by the bathrooms there for free magazines for people to take.
And what about books? Let's say, I see, you said 250,000 books. Is there like a movement that you would look at and say, hey, boy, nobody's checked out Mark Lucchese's autobiography in 3 years. Maybe it's time to move that on. Do you have, I'm sure there's issues like that.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole process, and that kind of thing takes place on a daily basis here.
Yeah.
But it's up to each individual librarian. Our collection is divided up amongst the librarians. Someone with a library science degree. And so for example, I do 600s, which is medical, gardening, cookbooks. There's some other things
the
thrown in
pastry
there.
chef connection.
Exactly. And so I order books in that collection, but I also weed the books in that collection. And so it's based on condition. So if it's been roughly used and it's starting to look worn, let's get rid of it. If the information is no longer relevant, let's get rid of it. If it's something that might have been super popular at one time, but now no one's checked it out, like you said, in 3-4 years.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of it. Because studies have found that removing old stuff from a collection, what we call dead wood, actually increases circulation numbers because it frees up space, like your mind's eye as you're looking at the shelf. If it's just completely packed, people can't browse it. It's not like it's like a bookstore. Bookstores, if you look at bookstores don't have every single space filled. They've got displays.
Oh, yeah,
they've
the
got
way
whatever.
they
You know what I mean?
angle
It's got to be
them.
browsable.
Yeah.
It's got to be browsable. So we do try to get rid of stuff.
So who selects the books that are to be read? The department heads, or is there a...
No. Again, it's the librarians, and we are pretty adamant, and most libraries are that it's that particular librarian that makes the choice. Nobody else. People can make suggestions, but ultimately it's that librarian who makes the choice. They purchase the books. They are the ones who get rid of the books. People can recommend. They say, oh, could you buy this? And they may get it, but then again, they may not.
So how do you decide on what books to purchase for people to read? I mean, is there like you go to the New York Times top 50 or whatever it is?
Yes, there are such a wide variety of things that we use. Publishers Weekly is a magazine that we use. New York Times, all sorts of websites. Sometimes you might even just I like to go to bookstores and just browse and see what's popular in bookstores, and that will kind of inform me of what's coming out, and what's popular and to purchase that way. So there's a variety of ways. There are awards lists like the children's department use, the Caldecott Awards, things like that. So there's lots of ways that they use, along with, like I said, recommendations. So.
How often do you order books? Is it a once a week, once a month thing, a daily? How often?
Every librarian is different. I try to do it every Wednesday. I try to log on for a little while and order some books. I may not get that far into it just because I am the city librarian. I've got other duties, but most librarians, they try to do it. I would say minimum weekly because books are constantly coming out, and you don't want to miss anything. But then again, you don't want to try to do it every single day.
A patron has an issue about a book and asks you to remove it for some sort of reason.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
So first thing we say is, have you read the book or seen the video or whatever the item is? And then we give them, there's a form that needs to be filled out. It has lots of questions on there, and that's one of the questions. Have you read this book? What is it you find offensive, or why do you want to get removed? And then right now, Mr. Trustee, the current process is that would get turned over to the trustees, and this person could also attend that meeting to make a case for why it needs to be removed. To my knowledge, I don't think that we've ever removed anything from our current collection. There is a story of George Paul Letchick, who was the city's first official city librarian. And back in the 50s, someone tried to have Lolita removed, Nabokov's Lolita.
Oh, yes, right.
And and I think his statement, I think it might have even been to the Chronicle at the time, I'd have to double check, was, you know what, if someone in Burlingame wants to read it, they should be able to read it. Which I think was actually fairly forward thinking for the 50s in Burlingame. That was considered a
I'd say that was pretty forward thinking.
Yeah, for Lolita. So
all right, Brad, time for another curveball, okay?
Uh-oh.
So I'm a new patron to the library with a shiny new library card, and I want to check out a book, but I'm in a hurry. And I don't want to use the Dewey Decimal System if that's still around. I'm not really sure. And I'm not real good with a computer. How can I get the book that I'd like in a hurry?
You could call the library. We'll still do things over the phone. You can stop in and just ask at the desk and say, hey, because this happens, we still do this. You can walk up and say, I'm looking for this title. We're happy to look it up, and we'll say, we currently don't have it on the shelf. We can place a hold, or we don't have that title in our collection at this moment. San Bruno does, and you can either go to San Bruno and pick it up, or we can have it sent over. There's a variety of ways around it, but we're happy to do it, whatever is required.
That's customer service, right?
Yeah.
So let's say the book is in San Bruno, How long? And I don't want to drive to San
Right.
Bruno. How long will it take to get from San Bruno to here? What's the turnaround? A couple of days?
It could be. I've seen them get here as fast as a day. If someone at San Bruno is really on their game and they see this hold request come in, or it could be 3 or 4 days maybe, depending on maybe they're having some staffing issues and maybe there's a delivery issue. But I would say on average I would say a couple of days.
Yeah. So let's take a few minutes and go to our favorite subject. We're coming up to March. That would be year 3, the start of I guess we're going to the endemic now. But
Right.
let's talk about 2 years of the pandemic because we're both managers. You still a manager and me just kind of going into Molly's once in a while. But the pandemic hit us both hard.
Right.
We were able to stay open. You weren't.
Right.
When it hit, what were you instructed to do right away? Where'd the instructions come from? City Hall shut down right away or what happened?
Yeah, just before the shutdown, we met. I remember it like it was yesterday. We all the department heads and some managers and the city manager, we all met in city council's chambers, and it was just a very weird time. And we all decided that at that moment we were going to stay open as long as we could, but that we saw it coming. So we started getting ready at the library. We started getting the message out that we were going to be closing soon. We weren't quite sure yet when, and for people to come pick up their holds, get as many books as they could, because we thought it was going to be a very short, like maybe 2-week period, maybe a week period. Come get your books so that you have something to read during this quick lockdown. Well, fast forward that to 3 years later, and people are still.
When the word came down that everybody shut down at the same time, in other words, did San Mateo close their library at the same time as Burlingame and Millbrae, or was it all kind of staggered?
It was mostly at the same time, but I think most of the libraries, give or take,
How
closed at the same time.
did you operate during the pandemic? I mean, there was still an opportunity to get books, right? But did curbside service come right away, or was there a little waiting period in there?
So the first 2 weeks, the city, we didn't know what was going on. The city just said, go home, you're getting paid, don't do anything. Don't come into the library, don't come into work, don't do anything. And so that was a little weird. I was coming into the building once a day just to check, to walk around the building, make sure there was no leaks, make sure there was nothing amiss.
Right.
So I was doing that. Then once we realized this was going to be kind of stretched out, we started meeting online. All the staff started meeting on Zoom. We started discussing things, started trying to come up with some plans of, all right, what does this look like? Let's find work to keep us busy while we're waiting for see what's going to happen. And then eventually, once we realized it was going to be more long term, we decided to break ourselves into 2 cohorts so that if something happened, we wouldn't all maybe spread the virus. And we started coming in as a cohort. So my cohort A, was coming in Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays. The other cohort B was coming in Tuesdays, Thursdays, and partially on Saturdays. And that was when we started, all right, we got to get the curbside service ramped up. We started coming up with a plan for that. And once we got the curbside service plan going, it was kind of KD bar the door because everybody started having ideas then. Children's were doing the book bundles for kids and all kinds of things. It was just, I think people were just kind of like going crazy at home. So,
Were there layoffs?
we did have to lay off our hourly staff. It was unfortunate, but it was it was coming from City Council, and they made the best decision they could, and that was to be able to keep all of our full-time staff fully employed throughout the lockdown. They had to cut costs somewhere, and so
Well, of course. Yeah.
Have
most of those people, or have any of those people that have been laid off come back, or have they found work elsewhere?
So a good majority of them have come back. It's not necessarily to the extent that it was previously, but pre-pandemic. We're doing our best now. Our hourly budget is a little better, and so we're doing our best to bring them back more, schedule them more. Some of them have moved on. Some of them moved on to different
Yep.
careers, different cities, different whatever, But most are still in the area, and we're trying to work with them. So
Let's talk patrons pre-pandemic and then after. So on an average, how many people would visit the library on a daily basis?
pre-pandemic, we would have roughly 1,000 people walk through our doors a day. Post-pandemic, I think it's increased, and to be honest, I haven't checked it recently. I know that when we first opened up, we had 400 to 500, which was half. So that's not bad, considering that some people were still being extra careful. I think it's probably increased to. I'm just guessing here because, like I said, I haven't checked it recently. It's probably increased to 600 to 700 because it has increased.
Yes, it's growing.
I just know it's not what it used to be.
And because of that, could that have something to do with some of the library activities and offerings? They're not really all back up to swing yet, are they?
We are not doing in-person events yet. We're still asking people to mask up and to socially distance within the library. So I think that has something to do with it. I've also heard from other trustees and from other people that some of our senior citizens don't feel safe coming back into the library, and so that probably has some of it to do with it. And until the 4 and under get fully vaccinated, I think that might have something to do with it too. So
do you think the library will ever have another author luncheon again?
So that's a library foundation question, and I know that it has been discussed. I think right now it's been kind of mothballed, that whole program, and that it was actually mothballed before the pandemic. The replacer right now is the speaker series.
That's what it was. That's what I was thinking about.
Right,
Yes.
the speaker series, and the speaker series actually I've been in discussion, and so there is a tentative speaker series coming up in September, in conjunction with a Hillsborough music organization. So it will be a jazz ensemble in September.
At the library here?
At the library.
Zoom or in person?
In person.
Wonderful.
In person. I'm understanding that they will require vaccination cards, people to be masked, I think probably by September. I'm just guessing, but anything could change,
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. So we're moving there.
And with that, I'm going to let you off the hook now, okay? So, Brad McCulley, thank you very much for being a guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been great.
Thank you, Brad. We kept our timing right. The Burlingame's Historical Society would be very proud of us today. Under 30 minutes. Good man. Thanks, Brad.
All right.
Brad McCulley, thanks so much for being our guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town. Thanks to my videographer, the great Ray Tyler, Shelby and Kathy for producing and editing, and our musical director, Bray. You can hear more of Bray at bray.com. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this video podcast, and no part of this program can be rebroadcast or copied without permission. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.